This week on the other side, Donald Trump on track to become President of the United States again. We'll tell you why. The federal budget, what a bore. As we predicted last week, Labor's patting itself on the back for delivering a surplus after winning the pokies. But they will continue to spend instead of paying down our massive national debt. One of Australia's elder statesmen and leading businessmen, Ron Menz, will join me to discuss the budget and his new book. A leading British commentator and a leading American commentator have their say on Woke Australia this week. We might not like to be criticised, but it often helps to listen to the perspectives of outsiders, and we are big grown-ups on this show. We'll bring you up to speed on what Triggernometry's Konstantin Kisin and Daily Wire's Matt Walsh think of where Australian culture is heading. They're funny guys, so you can laugh as you cry. And the Aussie eKarens get put in their place as Elon Musk has an initial court win. G'day Cairns, g'day Lismore, g'day Australia, and welcome to episode 313 of The Other Side for the weekend commencing Friday the 17th of May 2024. I'm Damien Curry, and welcome to the show that brings you a small government adult view of the world, not a childish ABC view of the world where we expect the government to fix everything for us.
It used to be you would go home at the end of the day, most people would go, oh, Cheers is on, oh, MASH is on, oh, Mary Tyler Moore is on, All in the Family's on. You just expected, there'll be some funny stuff we can watch on TV tonight. Well, guess what? Where is it? This is the result of the extreme left and PC crap and people worrying so much about offending other people.
Thank you, Jerry Seinfeld. And I just want you to know that if you're going to be offended by this weekend's show, tough. We don't care, not one little bit. Sorry, eKaren. Sorry, ACMA. Sorry, Elbow. Sorry, little greeny people with your little sensitive wokey brains.
eKaren, she's from the USA. Works for the Aussie government, they say. She likes to censor, control what we say. But Australians are free, we want to obey. She's got rules, regulations. Thinks she can manipulate our nation. But we won't back down, no hesitation. Australians speak up, it's our foundation.
I love that song. Yep, this is your summary of the week's best commentary from a centre-right classical liberal perspective to help you catch up and get smart for the weekend and the week ahead. This is The Other Side. The latest polling in the United States shows that if a presidential election was held today, without doubt, Donald Trump would beat Joe Biden. Even the left-leaning Fareed Zakaria on CNN is admitting that with less than 6 months to go until the election, things do not look good for Biden.
Trump is now leading in almost all the swing states, but behind those numbers lie even more troubling details. As someone worried about the prospects of a second Trump term, I think it's best to be honest about reality. I understand that polls are not always accurate, but in general, they have tended to underestimate Donald Trump's support, not overestimate it. The shift here is stark. On the question of who voters trust more to deal with the economy, Trump has a 22-point lead over Biden, according to an NBC poll from January. This marks a 15-point bump for Trump compared to the same poll in 2020. Immigration, Biden is 35 points behind Trump as to who would handle it better. Only 33% of Americans said they approved of Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war, which is now opposed both by people who think he is too soft and people who think he is too hard on Israel. The one that troubles me the most is on the question of who was the more competent. Joe Biden led Donald Trump by 9 points in 2020, but Trump now leads by 16 points in January 2024. That 25-point shift could be a reflection of people's sense that the president's age is affecting his capacity to govern.
Yeah, you reckon? It seems that the only way for the Democrats to win now is to find a superstar to replace Biden or put Trump in jail. But every time they try to bring charges against Trump, they end up making him look more like a martyr. In the current trial running in New York, the state prosecution, it's a Democrat government and a Democrat prosecutor, is trying to make the case that Donald Trump paid hush money to a former porn star that he'd had an affair with named Stormy Daniels. That in itself isn't technically illegal, but the technicality that Trump may have falsified some of his business records to cover up the payment is. Whatever it takes, right? Anyway, the credibility of Stormy Daniels, or whatever existed of it in the first place, was completely shot this week when left-leaning, Democrat-voting, Trump-hating TV host Bill Maher revealed the absolute untrustworthiness of Daniels as a witness in any way, shape or form whatsoever. Maher replayed a video clip from an interview he did with Stormy Daniels in 2018, telling him that she was fully consenting in the sex that she claims to have had with Trump. But that completely contradicted the far more Me Too style victim story she delivered in the court witness box this week. Here's how Bill Maher told it on his show.
And first I asked her why she had sex with Trump. Listen to that, and then listen to what she says after that, and then we're going to talk about the trial, because it's quite at variance of what she said to me in 2018. Why did you Donald Trump? Okay, but you say it's not a Me Too case.
It is not a Me Too case. I mean, I wasn't assaulted. I wasn't attacked or raped or coerced or blackmailed. They tried to shove me in the Me Too box to further their own agenda. And first of all, I didn't want any part of that because it's not the truth, and I'm not a victim in that regard.
That's not what she's saying now. She's talking about he was bigger and blocking the way. It's all the Me Too buzzwords. She said there was a power imbalance of power, for sure. My hands were shaking so hard. She said she blacked out. Blacked out? She's a porn star.
Right. Well, that's one witness with absolutely zero credibility. Next. So anti-Trump commentators in America then shifted gear and made a big deal about the fact that the star witness in the case, former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, was going to be in the stand. Cohen used to work for Trump. He described himself in the court as Trump's fixer. And he's the only person that's likely to provide any direct evidence that Trump ordered a cover-up of a payment to Daniels. But the thing about Cohen is he hates Trump and he has an axe to grind. He spent more than a year in prison after pleading guilty to 9 federal crimes that had nothing to do with Trump. And he was disbarred as a lawyer. Since getting out of jail, he's had his own podcast in which he constantly criticizes Trump, and he's written 2 books about Trump, and one of them was called Revenge. So he's hardly what you'd call a credible witness, especially since this is what he used to say about Trump.
One thing Donald Trump is, he's a compassionate man. He's a man of great intellect, great intuition, and great abilities. Mr. Trump's memory is fantastic, and I've never come across a situation where Mr. Trump has said something that's not accurate. Mr. Trump truly cares about America. He loves this country. He's an amazing negotiator, maybe the best ever in the history of this world. The words the media should be using to describe Mr. Trump are generous, compassionate, principled, empathetic, kind, humble, honest, and genuine.
That little compilation from CNN. Yeah, just a little bit inconsistent from Cohen there. Funny how the Democrats and the left always say that Trump is the one who puts the country's democratic institutions and conventions at risk. Then they proceed to do that themselves by using the entire criminal justice system for their political goal of trying to bring him down. The hypocrisy. People are waking up to it though. The whole thing is just backfiring on the Democrats big time. A point not even lost on CNN's Fareed Zakaria.
And the trials against him keep him in the spotlight, infuriate his base, who sees him as a martyr, and even may serve to make him the object of some sympathy among people in general who believe that his prosecutors are politically motivated. This happens to be true, in my opinion. I doubt the New York indictment would have been brought against a defendant whose name was not Donald Trump.
Wow. There is the admission, even from the left-wing media, that this is nothing but a political witch hunt. Fox News commentator Joe Concha summed it all up really well.
Fareed Zakaria is absolutely correct, and we need to hear more of this kind of commentary from those who say they are journalists over at that network or at MSNBC. Both exist as the resistance networks for the most part to Donald Trump, who you see on your screen, that there is no there when it comes to this made-for-cheesy TV show trial in Lower Manhattan. Zakaria knows what anyone sane and sober has observed over the last 4 weeks. No crime has been defined to this point. And Michael Cohen, who has been acting like one of the sorriest figures you could possibly imagine and wearing Superman T-shirts on TikTok and selling merchandise around jailing his former boss, apparently this is the star witness for Alvin Bragg. If they're depending on Cohen, who already has gone to jail, who has already admitted to lying countless times in terms of when he's on the witness stand, we're looking at either a hung jury or even an acquittal, even in Manhattan, which voted basically 9 out of 10 people voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump in 2020. So this is where we're at this point. And when you consider Fonnie Willis, Jack Smith, those trials are probably happening after Election Day. This lawfare attempt to take out Donald Trump looks to be over. And then, Carly, wow, we may have an election that's not based on trials and what we've been seeing over all these weeks, but on issues, the things people care about. And that's the last thing Democrats want at this point. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but it's what the people want. Excellent analysis there from journalist and commentator Joe Concha on the US Fox News network. Of course, it's not over yet. If Trump gets convicted of a crime, public opinion could shift sharply against him. But oh, the damage this is doing to the reputation of the United States. What an absolute banana republic these politically motivated Democrat trials are making the country seem. Finally, some common sense has come out of the leadership of this country. A judge has ruled, temporarily at least, in favour of Elon Musk and free speech and against the censorious overreach of ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, who regulate this show and ADH TV, scarily enough, so I'm taking a risk here saying anything, and Australia's E-Safety Commission, which sits under ACMA, and its overzealous Commissioner Julie Inman Grant. The federal court refused to extend a temporary order for X to hide videos of a Sydney terrorist stabbing globally. Not in Australia. Let that sink in. X had already geo-blocked the footage in Australia. They complied. It only refused to remove the footage globally, to take it down. Who do these petty power-mad bureaucrats in Canberra think they are? Oh, we can tell the whole world what they can and can't see. No, you cannot. And as I've said before, I've seen this footage, and it's hardly too graphic for adults to watch compared to a PG Hollywood movie. This is not a healthy balance for a liberal democratic society between free speech and public protection when you let a trumped-up bureaucrat start making rules like that.
eKaren, you can try, but you won't succeed. We won't be silenced, we won't concede. We've got our voices, now believe. No amount of censorship can bring us to our knees.
Well, we have a range of graduated powers. There could be civil proceedings and we could take them to court or we could fine them. Of course, the quantum of the fine would depend on the gravity of the non-compliance.
Oh, the quantum of the fine depends on the gravity of the non-compliant. Who speaks like that? Bureaucrats who have too much power, that's who. The quantum. The quantum of this, the quantum of that. Anyone who says the quantum of anything, and she says that a lot, you should be wary of. Oh look, the quantum of water in my glass is starting to get low. Can someone please top up the quantum of water, please? I'm feeling a certain quantum of stress here, and the amount of the fine depends on the gravity of the non-compliance. Oh yeah, that's the kind of speech that authoritarians and lawyers use right before they, shuffle you off to jail for wrongthink. Under the Draconian Online Safety Act that was passed in 2021, thanks ScoMo, Julie Inman Grant has the authority to demand the removal of any so-called Class 1 material. And they'll define what Class 1 material is, of course. If a social media company refuses to remove that material, then massive fines can be imposed. And I mean massive. We're talking $750,000 a day. We have to ask ourselves if we're okay with this level of censorship, Australia. These laws need to be axed in my opinion, and the entire eSafety Commission needs to be dissolved. Why? Because as this case with Musk shows, they simply cannot be trusted to use their powers in a measured, restrained, and sensible way suitable for a liberal democracy of free people. People were worried at the time that these laws were introduced about their possible abuse like this, and we were told then, oh no, they won't be abused. Only in the most exceptional circumstances will they be used. You know, all the usual stuff that governments say when they want to shove through crazy laws, and then within a couple of years, bang, we've got this ridiculous case of a clear abuse of power. As Professor Ramesh Thakur of the Liberty think tank, the Brownstone Institute, wrote in a letter to The Australian this week, the most important lesson of the court victory for Elon Musk is it shows just how flawed eSafety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant's judgment is. Think about this and then shudder at just how much power she has under our draconian laws to determine what we can and cannot watch. Then repeat the shudders at the realization that Peter Dutton has supported the law and her efforts to own the internet. But get this, instead of arguing the case on its merits, the eSafety Commissioner's lawyers made it all about whether or not extending the court order would make a mockery of the courts. I humbly don't think so. I think it makes a mockery of the eSafety Commission and Julie Inman-Grant. And I think that is what most upsets them. X's lawyer told the court that the company hadn't complied with the injunction because the Commissioner's initial takedown notice wasn't valid. Now we need to watch out because the Attorney General Mark Dreyfus has said the government will, quote, examine the court's decision. At least opposition leader Peter Dutton has now said that it's silly to expect global orders to be enforced. Thank God he's finally read the room on this censorship push. Ultimately, the law is meant to express the will of the people in a democracy via our representatives and interpreted by our courts. The only way you can express your will on this is to speak out all over social media and to vote accordingly at the next election. Peter Dutton would be wise to make a clear statement of commitment to remove the current eSafety Commissioner for this absurd overreach and poor reading of the public mood, and to commit to bringing the powers of the eSafety Commission back to its original intention of protecting children online, not censoring adults. A commitment to true classical liberalism from the Liberal Party and a real option to vote for would also be a nice thing to see for a change.
You can and you can try, but you won't succeed. We won't be silenced, we won't concede.
Are you accepting it?
We've got our voices and our beliefs. No amount of censorship can bring us to our knees.
Well, we have a range of graduated powers.
It's an issue that's outraged smart Aussies on the left and the right in what the Human Rights Law Centre says represents a dark day for democracy. 60-year-old former Australian Army legal officer David McBride has been sent to jail for almost 6 years after being found guilty of stealing classified defence secrets and sharing them with journalists. Justice David Mossop of the ACT Supreme Court found McBride had committed a gross breach of trust. McBride is the guy who leaked classified documents to the ABC, which then used them to produce their 2017 Afghan Files reports, which alleged a cover-up of war crimes by Australian soldiers and the very important reviews and investigations that we've had since. The judge said McBride's conduct had caused significant harm to the Commonwealth by releasing defence secrets, including its rules of engagement in Afghanistan. The Australian newspaper reported that McBride's supporters cried "shame on you" as the sentence was delivered, and his legal team has vowed an appeal. Speaking to reporters back in 2019, McBride made no apologies for his actions, and he said there was nothing in the classified documents that Australians don't deserve to know. This video of that statement from 2019 comes from the Australian Associated Press and the Australian newspaper. McBride was asked then if he had his time over, whether he would do it again.
Yeah, I would. That's a good question. Maybe I'm a bit mad. And I do often, when I'm down and I'm thinking about the trial, I think, well, you're proud of yourself and you've done the right thing.
Do you understand where the government's coming from their point of view, though? Why they want to try and protect their secrets?
Yeah, no, that's fine, and that's quite a good question. That's the way they want to play it. And the former Secretary of Defence has come out and said, oh, well, we need to protect our secrets. The Americans won't give us secrets if we don't protect. But that's a smokescreen. There are no secrets. There's shame. You know, if we kill our own soldiers, if we experiment on them illegally, if we bug officers of other countries for oil companies, that's not a secret, that's a crime. And we don't cover up crimes. In fact, if you put on a uniform, I reckon it's your job to uncover crimes.
As the former Army Major entered court this week, he said, I may have broken the law, but I did not break my oath to the people of Australia and the soldiers who keep us safe. But the judge didn't agree. He reportedly said that self-confident people with strong opinions need to be deterred from making unlawful disclosures. McBride pled guilty last November to the 3 charges of stealing and unlawfully sharing secret information that he faced. Even though he blew the whistle on the bad stuff going on, the court was also told that McBride believed that the ADF was undertaking overzealous murder investigations into serving soldiers who killed captured Afghans while defending themselves. And he said that these investigations were of a political nature. He didn't like the way the ABC reported on the leaks that he gave them, and he was furious at the suggestion that Australia's special forces killed people unnecessarily. Albo's Justice Minister, the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, could intervene in this case, but he's chosen not to. Independent MP Andrew Wilkie says that's not good, and he should. The thing is, Australia, that we've got to weigh up what we want. Do we want whistleblowers who are going to put themselves at huge risk to blow the whistle when they think it's appropriate? And even if they're right, most of them suffer enormously for doing the right thing. So when we get a bloke who maybe went a bit too far, do we need to be a bit tolerant and not come down on him like a ton of bricks because he's embarrassed some people in high places? Otherwise, you get no whistleblowers anymore, ever. And that, of course, is music to the ears of any government, of any political persuasion, which is why good people on the left and right, even if we think McBride went too far in this case, support him on principle. With all due respect to the Supreme Court Justice of the great territory that is the ACT, and I'm speaking not to criticise the court or the correctness of its ruling in any way here, but merely expressing a personal opinion on the principle of the law in this matter, I find myself agreeing with a federal Greens politician that I don't like at all, who said this: a 5-year prison sentence has sent a chill down the spines of truth tellers across the country, just as it was designed to do. We must support whistleblowers. A healthy liberal democracy has to have whistleblower protections. Tax Office whistleblower Richard Boyle is another one we need to support. He faces a criminal trial later this year, which we will be watching very, very closely. The Attorney General should pardon McBride and drop proceedings against Boyle. The burden of whistleblowing means it's highly unlikely anyone is going to do it lightly. Well, the federal budget was very exciting, wasn't it, hey? Hugely boring, just the same old, government spending a truckload of money that it doesn't have and racking up more debt. Buying the votes of the economically and financially ignorant with silly little handouts. Here's $300 for your energy bill. Just giving our own money back to us and making it out to be some kind of gift. No cutback in government spending at all. And that is the only measure of a good budget, whether the government is cutting spending when it's been overspending. A surplus is meaningless if the government got a tax windfall in the year before, which they did. The question is, are they going to waste that one-off lucky win at the pokies and pay off the credit card a bit, or are they recklessly going to spend it? Chalmers getting excited about his surplus is like a guy who makes $5,000 a month, winning 10 grand at the pokies one day, spending 14 grand that month, and then telling his wife, oh, I've got a surplus of $1,000. Look at me, aren't I a good boy? No, you just overspent again and didn't pay off any of the family's massive credit card debt. Opposition leader Peter Dutton told the ABC news show, ABC Breakfast, the morning after the budget, that the government's handouts are just a band-aid on a bullet wound.
as most credible economic journalists have pointed out, this is an inflationary budget, and it is going to make it harder for interest rates to come back, and it's going to make it more difficult for families and small businesses for longer. As was the case for Labor in Queensland facing an election, they're splashing out cash because they know that they've got a huge problem on their hands.
Mr Dutton told the taxpayer-funded government broadcaster that if we are going to be doing government handouts, we should be fixing a more serious problem in ways that will really help long term.
We've got people living in cars and in tents. The Prime Minister had nothing to say about that yesterday. The Treasurer had nothing to say about it last night. You've got 1.67 million people coming in over a 5-year period under this government. It's unprecedented. Not under any previous Liberal or Labor government have you seen the immigration levels this high. And that means that with an 11-year low in building starts, you are seeing people lining up 30, 40 deep to find a rental property. People can't buy a house at an auction for love nor money. And this government spent $315 billion more, which has driven up inflation and therefore interest rates.
That's Peter Dutton speaking with ABC News Breakfast on Wednesday morning. One of Australia's greatest free market thinkers is Ron Manners. 88-year-old Mr Manners is the founder of the Mancal Economic Education Foundation and the founder and former chairman of what was at one point Australia's third largest gold producer. Mr Manners' contribution to the mining industry earned him induction into the Australian Mining Hall of Fame in 2011 and an AO in 2020. He's got a new book out called The Impatient Libertarian, and he will be speaking at an event in Brisbane next week. If you want to go to that event, just jump on Eventbrite, B-R-I-T-E, eventbrite.com.au and look up Ron Manners and you'll find the event. It's Wednesday night in Brisbane at 6 o'clock, proudly presented by the Australian Institute of Progress. I'm very thrilled to have Ron Manners on the show today. Ron, thank you very, very much for joining us, sir. Good to have you here.
It's a pleasure, Damien.
Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the federal budget before we get into talking about your book.
Well, Damien, all depends. Different people measure success in different ways, and you really have to understand our Prime Minister Albo, who came when he was at, I think, at Sydney University. He came under the influence of a Marxist professor called Ted Wheelwright. And then Albo went on to form, and he ran the Trotsky Society at that university for quite a few years. As a matter of fact, his nickname was Trot.
Okay, I had heard that, yeah.
Now, all that stuff he was quite proud of that, and it was all very visible on his profile, on his social media profile, until he became Prime Minister. Now it's all been whited out. So
I'm sure
you can't. So their way of measuring success is to recruit more people who are dependent on government, and not independent and dependent on themselves. And when they say they're going to create more housing, their idea is to create more government-owned housing, for which we will be forever locked into living in a government house. And their idea of unemployment is really a strange figure, as the private sector is being squeezed and is unable to meet all these unbelievably difficult industrial relations laws that are brought in. They pick up the people that become unemployed out of the private sector and employ them in the government sector. So yeah. Really, when you look at employed people in government sectors, it's really it's hidden unemployment figures. So, and so I say, we all measure things differently, and their measurement, by their measurement of success, this government said, this latest budget, federal budget, is completely successful because we'll recruit more people.
Yeah, it's successful at growing the size of government, which is what they obviously aim to do, and lessening our control. I've read the book, The Impatient Libertarian. It is a wonderful book, and I recommend everybody grab a copy, because not only in here do you tell a story of people who've influenced you, 5 figures that have influenced you, but you also lay out a bit of a roadmap for what we've got to do and some ideas of how to actually go about fixing things, Ron. There seems to be a great groundswell of frustration out there, but it's very hard to break through because the left have so entrenched themselves, particularly in the last 25 years, I think, even more so than the 25 years before that. They've really entrenched themselves in our educational institutions, our media institutions. It's very hard to get traction nowadays, even corporates with DEI and ESG. What do we do to get out of this mess?
Well, I tell our young people we have a whole bunch of Mankell scholars that we create opportunities for. I tell them the secret of maximum happiness and maximum life to look forward to is to quickly reduce their expectations for what government can do for them, and on the other hand, increase their expectations of what they can do for themselves. And it's sort of a simple little message, but it gets through to them that we are completely in charge of our future, and to fob that off and subcontract it out to the government is a recipe for failure. But we've been doing this every time, and it's a drift. And the results, I think the statistics were just released yesterday about how our educational standards have dropped substantially since the year 2000. That's 24 years. So much money has been poured into education, but our educational standards on all the key subjects are producing an inferior product, who are incapable of understanding what's going on to them. Now, the Marxist Trotskyite concept is for recruiting more and more people to be reliant on government. So they are extremely successful. They're so happy with these statistics that they come out. They don't want people to be well educated, to be able to rationally think for themselves. It's the last thing they want.
Yeah. You mentioned in the book, I think that's 1 in 3, is it? Australian employed people are employed by government.
Terrible.
Is that sustainable? I mean, no wonder we've got $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion if you count state government of debt.
Well,
right?
It's inevitable. The cost of servicing that government debt is beyond all the expenditure that they're spending on education and welfare, and it's unsustainable. The only way out when they get themselves into that situation is to seriously devalue the currency. And that's what the Australian dollar is slipping seriously against other world currencies. Yeah. And you only notice that when you decide to travel or import something, and you find, hey, our dollar just doesn't go very far and it's disappearing. Devaluing the currency is equivalent to declaring bankruptcy or partial bankruptcy and paying out the creditors 10 cents in the dollar. But that's what's been done by several South American and the East European countries. They had to devalue their currency because they had no other way out. I'm afraid that's probably on the present path. That's probably our only alternative. Could be
Ron,
rescued
you've been
at any time.
Sorry, you've been doing this for a long time. I mean, you've been out there. Your story is just fantastic. I loved reading about it. Your life story and your involvement with the Foundation for Economic Education, fee.org in the United States, which is a fantastic website for anybody who's interested in learning about economics and liberalism and libertarianism and different philosophies. But you've been around for a while, shall I say, and one of the few people I interview that's older than me. But could you tell me, from your perspective, are things worse now than you can remember, or do you remember a time in Australia's history through the latter part of the last century where it was this bad?
My memory goes back to as far as the Menzies induced credit squeeze of 1960-61.
Right.
And that was a time where things were unsustainable. We had the economy was propped up with tariff protection, and you couldn't import the machinery you wanted. You couldn't import it. The tariffs were so high. And that was a terrible spot. I was in business with my father at that time, and they had very little concept of how the economy worked. And as the present federal government has no idea how by reducing the burden, the economy will get up and go. So the Treasurer said to Bob Menz, look, the economy's overheating, what are we going to do? So they decided to issue an edict to all the banks that all business overdrafts had to be cut by 50% within a week.
Wow.
And way back then, small businesses might have an overdraft of £10,000 or something like that. That had to be cut. So they all started knocking on doors and collecting debts and picking up. The whole thing contracted. The two biggest chains of retail stores all around Australia were Reed Murray and Cox Brothers. There was a branch of every one of those in every state, every city throughout Australia. Within weeks, they all closed.
My God.
Everything closed. Okay. And the whole economy absolutely stopped. They were dreadful times, probably worse than now. Through a total lack of understanding how there's no concept of reducing the burden, and the burden is intolerable again. If you want to start a business, it's very difficult.
In those days, it was very much the burden was sort of, I suppose, very clear and explicit in those sorts of strong government policies. These days, it's very subtle and insidious, and it comes in through green tape and red tape and compliance with oodles of complex regulations. And it's sold in this way that's sort of like, we're doing everybody a favour, we're so nice as government, we're here to help and we're here to keep you safe. It's scary.
The approvals position is the approvals process is run by ideologues who just want to destroy the economy. Yesterday, I think that was Santos sacked 200 people in Western Australia. There's plenty of natural gas here. There's plenty of projects they want to bring on stream, whilst at the same time there's a drastic shortage of gas to create some alternative to this unreliable, what they call renewable energy, which is intermittent energy, that we desperately need this. All these projects are lined up, but they can't get approvals. So they've had to dismiss 200 vital people that were working for our welfare and our benefit. The average person has no concept that there's a link between prosperity and productivity. If you wanted to start up a company, you'd go and register it in somewhere like Estonia and have a foreign base for it. You could run your business anywhere in the world, but you would pick a jurisdiction where there is encouragement to start a company.
Yep. Ron, I love the book. I love everything you say. It's great to talk to you. I hope when you're in town, we can catch up and sit down for a longer chat on the other side, because I think you've got an incredible amount of wisdom to impart to us all. Ron Menz.
I might just cannot mention one aspect about the book, which is surprising. I think I explained in the book how I gave an impromptu talk to a think tank in Guatemala a few years ago, and it was why our Bandcal Economic Education Foundation is a little bit different. I said it's different because it was influenced by these 5 separate individuals who had completely dissimilar styles, and I analysed the styles in there.
Yeah.
And the feedback I'm getting is beyond belief, because I'm getting so many people, some high-profile people, some people I've known from way back. They're writing to me and saying they're using the same little pie chart apportionment of strategy versus ideas to analyse their own pie chart mix. And they're all getting completely different answers, but the information of why those 5 people were analysed and had completely different results has opened up their mind to analyse themselves,
yes,
which to me makes it a very successful and very satisfying book for me.
Yeah, well, it's a fantastic book, and it's that aspect of it is great too, because I think you get these systems of analysing people in management these days, and they've got 700 different categories, you know, and everybody gets so confused. It's a really simple way of looking at these 5 people that have influenced Ron through his life, and the ways in which they've balanced their nature is balanced between being ideas people or being strategists. And the book is called The Impatient Libertarian. I urge you to get a copy. And if you're in Brisbane, I'll be there. Join us on Wednesday night, the 22nd of May at 6 p.m. And you can get tickets on Eventbrite, brite.com.au. And if you put in the code other side as the code, you will get a discount on your ticket. So get onto Eventbrite, look up Ron Manners talk in Brisbane, and do join us for that one. Thanks, Ron.
It's a pleasure.
Great to talk to you. Well, can Australia endure the woke onslaught? That's the question asked by the global podcast Triggernometry this week, after the host, comedian and Russian-British celebrity commentator Konstantin Kisin visited our shores down under for a few weeks.
While a terrific honour for me, this is undoubtedly a bad sign for Australia. The tragedy of my career is that I say obvious things that everyone knows and am lavished with entirely unmerited praise in response. It pains me to point this out, but if Konstantin Kisin has been invited to give a series of talks in your country, all is not well.
He's a very funny man. And sometimes it's good to get an outsider's perspective on how we're doing as a country, a well-meaning and kind outsider he is. Konstantin says Australia appears to be infected by the same mind virus as the rest of the global Anglosphere.
The symptoms are all too familiar. Identity politics fueled by the false teaching of history. Political polarization, two-tier policing with anti-lockdown protests brutally suppressed, followed by the police standing by as crowds chant "Gas the Jews" outside the Sydney Opera House due to fears of upsetting social cohesion. The number of children being treated for gender dysphoria at Victoria's Royal Children's Hospital's gender clinic has increased by over 1,000% in less than a decade. Some journalists at the ABC, the country's national broadcaster, avoid revealing their nuanced political views to colleagues for fear of appearing insufficiently woke. Corporations jump on every progressive cause with enthusiasm. Activists want to cancel Australia Day. Instead of being a day of national unity, they want to turn it into one of shame and self-flagellation.
Check. Yep. That pretty well sums it all up. Sounds about right, Mr. Kisin. Thank you. 10 out of 10 on the diagnosis there, mate. Now, what the heck should we do about it? Well, he blames us. By us, I mean the centre-right. The centre-right people, the classical liberals and libertarians and conservatives who make up 90% of the people who watch this show. Bugger. I thought we could blame the left. Fact is, we are gutless cowards when it comes to standing up to the woke creeps who've infiltrated our media, our universities, our teacher staff rooms in schools, our legal profession, our courts, our government bureaucracy, and even our corporations with their DEI and ESG. So far, this infection hasn't caused too many serious symptoms.
As things stand, Australia's biggest challenge is not extremism, it is apathy born of comfort. Life here is good, and the differences to the rest of the Anglosphere are remarkable. Unlike major American and increasingly British cities, the streets and parks here are not overrun with people suffering from the scourges of addiction, homelessness and crime. Sydney and Melbourne ranked among the top 10 safest cities in the world in the Economist Intelligence Unit's Safe Cities Index 2021. And as the third and fourth most livable cities in the world according to the Economist Intelligence Unit's Global Livability Index 2023, with mining, drilling and agriculture responsible for over 70% of the country's exports. Australia has highly paid jobs for those outside of the laptop class. A mine truck driver can earn over 130,000 Australian dollars a year. That's nearly £70,000, while going down into the mine can bring as much as 250,000 Aussie dollars, £130,000. I know many lawyers, senior doctors and other professionals in London who can only dream of such earnings.
Maybe we're too comfortable, and I don't think that's going to last, actually. I think troubles are coming. Kinnan's video is a great watch, so do check it out after you finish watching this show, of course. He touches on The Voice, political polarisation and immigration.
While tens of thousands of people come to the UK on small boats illegally every year, and millions stream in through the porous southern border of the United States, Australia has comprehensively solved this problem. Far from being some sort of voodoo magic, which is what it feels like it would take to address this issue in our countries, all that was needed for the then Prime Minister Tony Abbott to stare down a resistant civil service and legal challenges to deliver Operation Sovereign Borders in 2013. While Abbott still attracts criticism and protest, as I discovered when I had the honour of joining him on stage at Sydney University event, the facts of the matter are simple. 74 people came to Australia illegally on boats in 2023, down from 17,202 in 2012. It can be done. It just takes balls, and miraculously, some Aussie politicians still have them.
Well, let's hope so. 765,900 people came to Australia legally in 2023, though. I get the feeling the more guts Aussie politicians on the right start to show in coming months, the more chance they will have of being safely elected, not less. Popular Daily Wire host Matt Walsh is another foreign commentator who's been discussing Australia's decline into wokeism lately. He's delivered us a serve for going from a nation full of heroic Steve Irwins to what now appears to be a land of woke wimps.
And I'm sure there are great people in Australia. But my opinion of Australia, I'm just being honest with you, my opinion of Australians has just plummeted. Like before COVID, I thought that Australia was, first of all, an absolute hellscape where poisonous spiders rain from the sky. That part is true, but then I further thought that because of that, anyone who lives there, these have to be like the toughest sons of on the planet. I really thought. I thought it was just I thought it was a whole country of Steve Irwins. That's what I thought. And from COVID and now ending with this, I'm like, how is Australia the weakest, wokest, lamest country on earth? How is that possible?
Yes, how is that possible? How did we get here? Matt Walsh made his name on Daily Wire and for his exceptional documentary, What is a Woman? He has less experience of our country than Konstantin Kisin does, but I reckon he's not far off the mark there. His assessment is based on a comparison of the American version of a reality TV show called Alone and the Australian version of the same show. Matt says that the American version's been going for 10 years and involves a bunch of trained survivalists being thrown into the jungle and being required to survive alone with just a camera to film themselves on. Last one surviving wins. Matt stumbled on the new Aussie version of the show and he thought it'd be great.
First of all, surviving in Australia would be pretty tough, you'd think. Like Australia is a dangerous place. And I also thought Australians are a hardy people. You know, I bet they could survive for months without tapping out. Usually on the American version, you know, the winner survives 90 days, maybe at most, 100 days at most. I thought Australians, like they could, this show will go on for 6 years and they won't tap out. I mean, this will be really interesting.
But what Matt got was not what he bargained for. He says the show is good, but for the opposite reason he thought.
Which makes it unintentionally like the funniest show that I've ever seen. Because apparently the producers of the Australian version of Alone decided that making Alone Australia isn't really what they wanted to do. What they wanted to do is they wanted to make Alone DEI edition. That's what they decided. So they got 10 contestants, just like the American version. But they did not get like gritty, skilled survivalist types. They were more concerned with checking all the PC boxes. So they ended up with 2 lesbians, 2 people who claim to be indigenous, this like Gen Z environmentalist guy, and other people, like most of whom are totally unqualified for wilderness survival at all.
Oh, so it's diversity, equity, and inclusion alone. Woke alone. Well, how did that work out, I wonder?
One of the lesbians dropped out after one night, started crying and dropped out after one night. One of the indigenous guys, this is my favorite thing, like at least just watch the second episode of the show, it's hilarious. This indigenous guy, he spends the whole first day like going on and on about how he's indigenous and he's in touch with nature and, you know, he can do this because he's indigenous. Oh, by the way, did you know I'm indigenous? I'm indigenous. I'm so indigenous. I'm the most indigenous guy of all time. And then he starts crying and drops out after 24 hours because he was lonely. The Gen Z guy, I'm not making this up. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. The Gen Z guy, it's like 22 years old. He takes a COVID test out in the wilderness with a COVID test, and it comes back positive. And he immediately calls the med team to evacuate him and starts complaining that his heart is racing. And he's like, the med team comes in on their boat and they take him out, and he's curled up in the boat, like shivering. And he just tested positive for COVID 3 minutes ago. This was all on the first day. They lost 3 people on the first day, all of them crying. Like, I could do better than this.
There are lots of other things in the show that we as modern Aussies have come to accept as normal in our culture now that foreigners still find somewhat amusing, providing us with a good and healthy reminder of how much we've changed and perhaps not for the better.
Meanwhile, again, I'm not making this up, each episode starts with a land acknowledgement. That's real. There are all kinds of these woke environmental restrictions, so they aren't allowed to hunt pretty much any game. They can't even use a fishing net because the endangered platypus might get caught in the net. So they can't eat. Like they're all there and they can't eat anything. And on the rare occasion that they do catch something to eat, like with a makeshift fishing line, most of them are vegetarians. So they get really emotional about the fact they have to eat. One woman, she caught an eel and she was really sad. She was like crying while she was beating the eel to death because she's a vegetarian. And then she ate it and was like trying to stifle her vomit while she's eating this poor creature. It's just, I'm telling you, it is, it's a bunch of woke, whiny liberals sitting around crying and starving.
Oh, God, that is gold. Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, giving us an outsider's view of the way that our culture seems to have changed a little bit in recent times. Definitely some vegan food for thought. And that is all we have time for this week on The Other Side. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, X, and YouTube at Other Side Oz. That's at Other Side Oz. They are our 2 main social media platforms. We're no longer on Meta's Facebook or Instagram. We can't trust them. And please smash the like, subscribe, and every other button on all the platforms that you possibly can. And please make comments because that also helps with the magical algorithms that control us all. Of course, the best place to join us is right here on ADH TV. That's ADH.TV, our independent platform on any web browser. And it's absolutely free. And when you sign up on ADH, then you get all our other great content. Alexandra Marshall, Daisy Cousins, Spectator TV, Nick Cater, Church and State with Dave Pello, and all the special events up there for you to watch on demand too. We'll catch you next week for The Other Side. We drop a new show every Friday night at 8 p.m. I'm Damien Curry. Bye for now.